Welcome to another live episode of GeekOutdoors.com. This week, going to be talking about Rampage, the movie. Also, Mozilla has just released a brand new, faster browser. And finally, we'll be talking about a brand new kernel release of Linux 4.14. So, let me get things set up and we will get started with the news. And one of the things that I was really surprised about when I was doing this was the fact that I did not know that there was a Rampage movie based upon the video game. So I'm going to get into that a little bit further. Let me see. All right. And let's get in here. And so whenever I was looking through YouTube, okay, just looking through some videos, and obviously there are ads in front of the videos. And then I saw something for Rampage, and it actually had The Rock on there, and I didn't know why The Rock was on there, you know, so I'm like, well, what is this movie about? And so once I started watching the trailer, if you haven't seen the trailer, go check it out because it is interesting. So let me go ahead and turn on my chat right here. Okay, oops, it's not right. No. Okay. All right. So with Rampage, when I saw the trailer, originally when I saw the trailer, I thought it was actually Jumanji. Okay, so if you didn't know, The Rock, along with some other stars, especially I can't remember the comedian's name. It's Kevin something. I can't remember his name. But they are going to be in a remake of the movie Jumanji. And so when I saw the trailer for Rampage, I thought, wait, is this Jumanji? Because it starts off in the jungle, okay, which is what Jumanji, the whole setting is in Jumanji. And so I thought, wait, isn't this Jumanji? And then as you're watching through it, and you know, if you haven't seen, I'm going to spoil something about the trailers. And so it shows The Rock, and he's caring for this humongous gorilla who is a all-white gorilla. And then I'm kind of confused, okay? And so as it's going further, it has some alien elements to it as well. And so George, which is the name of this gorilla, which The Rock pretty much saved and helped raise, he becomes big, okay? He becomes absolutely huge. And there are also other animals related to that as well. And so as it was going through the trailer and it showed the other animals, obviously it showed the military, and then it started showing these huge monsters going into the city and destroying buildings. I'm like, wait, this sounds a lot like Rampage, the video game. And come to find out, it is based upon Rampage, the video game. And I was just, because it's got basically the King Kong, which is the gorilla. It has the wolf, which is the wolf man. And then on the final scene of the trailer, it has basically Godzilla, but it's an alligator. And so what happens with the trailer is this foreign object, this alien object that drops, whenever animals touch this object, it starts transforming them, and obviously they get bigger and bigger and they become these huge monsters. Okay, so why this is surprising to me is maybe, I mean, I love movies, but I don't always keep up with the movie news. But I'm really surprised because I did not expect them to make a movie adaptation out of this video game. I mean, Rampage, if you didn't know, it came out, I think, if I remember correctly, in 1986, 1987. It was done by Bali Midway, and this is one of those classics that I think a lot of people who grew up in this era or who really love retro games, they love this game. And I remember playing this in the arcade. It was a 3-player cabinet, and you could either choose from George, Lizzie, or Ralph, and they kept the name George. And so George is obviously the King Kong character, Lizzie is the Godzilla character, and Ralph is the wolf character, the Wolfman character. And the whole point of this is you going and destroying as many buildings as you can, and then the military is trying to stop you, and then you're also eating people as well. So it's really a great time. Now, Rampage did have sequels. They actually had a Rampage World Tour. I think that was on the N64, and there were some other spin-off games off of Rampage, but they were never as good as the original, and that's why I enjoyed it so much. And so this gets into the whole topic of video game adaptations to movies. Okay, so this isn't anything new. They've been trying for years and years and years, and I think the first big video game to movie adaptation was actually Mario Brothers, or Super Mario Brothers. Okay, so we have some people on here. Good morning, KI2NE. Good morning, Samuel S. And good morning, Lance. And so KI2NE is saying Kevin Hart. Yes, that's right, Kevin Hart. I don't know why I couldn't remember his name. And there was also another very popular actor in the movie as well. And once again, I can't remember his name. Samuel S. is saying hi, Geek, and all who joins. What's up, guys? And then Lance is saying good morning, Go. Good morning, all. And yeah, so with Mario Brothers, or Super Mario Brothers, it had John Leguizamo in it and Bob Hoskins. That was the very first that I can recall big video game adaptation of a movie. And if you remember watching that, it was absolutely horrible. It was nothing like Super Mario Brothers. And then that kind of set the stage for everything else. Okay, so if you're old enough to remember, or maybe you like watching older movies, okay, there was Mario Brothers, or Super Mario Brothers, whatever you want to call it. Then there was Double Dragon, which was also absolutely horrible. What was another one? More recently, there was Pixels, and there was, what's another one? There's been so many video game adaptations. I think there was an Alone in the Dark movie with Christian Slater. Obviously, probably the most popular, and I think the best, maybe not the best, yeah, maybe the best adaptation of a video game movie, I think, was Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie. And they're actually going to be doing another Tomb Raider. You've probably seen the trailer with that one with Vander, I can't remember her name, but she was in the really good movie, the AI movie, and that name kind of escapes me right now. And also, in my opinion, my favorite video game adaptation movie is Mortal Kombat. I mean, the first one, not the second one. The second one, Annihilation, was absolutely horrible. But the reason why I enjoyed Mortal Kombat the movie so much is because, first, the soundtrack. The soundtrack, I think anybody who remembers it goes, Mortal Kombat. I mean, that will never get old. I actually bought the whole soundtrack on a CD when I was a kid, and I listened to that over and over. That's the first thing. But the reason why Mortal Kombat is my favorite video game adaptation of a movie is the fact that it knew what it was. It knew it was a video game movie, and it did not really try to complex things, okay? It didn't try to be something it wasn't, and it was absolutely fun. I love the way Reptile looked, Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, Sonya, Luke Cage, no, not Luke Cage, but I can't remember the name, the guy with sunglasses, Johnny. I can't even remember all the names, and even Goro was in there, not that great. Samsung was awesome. So Mortal Kombat knew what it was, and it did it awesomely well. And so that's why it's my favorite Mortal Kombat movie. Oh yeah, Lance is saying Resident Evil is pretty not bad. Yeah, Lance, I'm sorry, I forgot all about that. There's been so many of them. Resident Evil 1, I think, along with Lance, I think it was a good movie with Mila Jovovich. After that, it was all crap, in my opinion. I even watched the last few ones. I can't remember. Number 5 was Retribution. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's absolutely horrible. And what else was there? Oh yeah, Prince of Persia. That's another video game movie. Mark Wahlberg was in a video game movie as well. I can't even remember the name of the movie. But it was based upon the game with bullet time. Wow, there's been so many video game movie adaptations. And yeah, Prince of Persia, yeah, Samuel. That had, what's his, God, I can't even remember his name. I'm just forgetting all these actors and actresses' name, but all of you know which movies that I'm talking about. There's been so many video game to movie adaptations. And I understand why they've been trying this for so long. And I think it's even more important now. Oh yeah, James Bond. Yeah, you're right, Samuel. Yeah, James Bond. But actually, James Bond was probably the other way around, because the James Bond movies came out first before the video games. You know, whereas the video games came out first, and then they made a movie out of them. And you know, they knew back then, since Mario Brothers, that the video game market was getting huge. You know, because if you remember in the 80s, arcades were really big. Okay, but video gaming was not at the level that was. Back then it was Atari and the arcades. Okay, Pac-Man Fever was there, and so if you're too young to know what that means, maybe you could look it up, but Pac-Man Fever was there. Okay, so if you went to an arcade, you're going to be playing Pac-Man. There's tabletop Pac-Man as well. I used to love the arcade. Oh yeah, Lance, yes, Doom with The Rock. Oh crap. Okay, so yeah, Warcraft, yes, so many. Okay, so all of the people here are probably going to be listing a whole bunch, because there's been so many, and a lot of them I just want to forget. And so the industry kept growing. Okay, so by the time Mario Brothers came, you know, Super Nintendo was hot, Sega Genesis, but now the video game industry arguably is larger than the movie industry. Okay, so if you think about something like Call of Duty, right? Video games cost more to make. That's true. But you got to realize things cost more than they did in the 80s and 90s. And so it's all relative, you know. And as an industry, they actually make way more money now than they ever have before. So going back to Call of Duty, let's just say with marketing and everything else, okay, say the game costs about 150 million to make. And if you include, and I'm just throwing out numbers, okay, but this is probably in the range. And then if you throw in the marketing, say it cost them about $300 million to produce a Call of Duty game, including marketing, okay? So let's take the average movie, big blockbuster movie. I'm talking like the Justice League, a Wonder Woman, and Avengers. Okay, they normally cost anywhere from 180 to 250 million dollars to produce, and if you include marketing, probably 300 to anywhere 400 million dollars. Take Transformers, anything like that. Okay, so the production of a video game is still not as much as a movie. Okay, and Call of Duty is arguably one of the most expensive properties you can produce. Okay, so and I'm taking the most expensive for a reason. Okay, so these blockbuster movies come out, they have a blowout opening weekend. We're talking about worldwide numbers, and by the end of their run, let's say a Transformers, that's usually consistently, they make a ton of money, especially in China. So maybe by the end of their theatrical run across the whole world, they make 1 billion to 1.5 billion, and there's only a few billion-dollar movies out there, most of which is all owned by Disney, i.e. Marvel, and all their other Disney properties. And that's quite a bit of money. I mean, there's very few up in that billion-dollar range, but it keeps growing. You know, in the future we'll have a $1 trillion blockbuster movie. But compare that to Call of Duty, okay? The previous Call of Duty, I think in the first few days of release, if I'm not mistaken, it made over $500 million in sales. Anybody want to fact check that they can. But if you even looked at the previous Call of Duties, they make more in sales. Of course, this is before any costs are taken out of it. They make more than most blockbuster movies make in their entire lifetime. Okay, most movies are not going to make 500, 600 million. And the comparisons I made to like the Transformers, all these top tier, you know, very, I guess, elite billion-dollar club, video games make more than that normally in the first month, okay, for the top tier blockbusters. And we're talking about international numbers. And if you're talking about microtransactions, DLCs, all the partnerships that are involved, all the merchandise, all the special editions, everything else, the video game industry dwarfs the movie industry. And if you want to pack in esports as well, the esports industry dominates sports. If you combine all of them together, and you know, you can fact check this if you want, but the top esports gaming, they're actually getting more people around the world than any top sports. I think even beyond FIFA or NFL or anything else combined, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's right. And so everybody, even as a consumer, we know the video game industry is absolutely massive. But from a business point of view, a lot of sports athletes, a lot of sports teams, they're buying esports teams, or they have already. And so it's not just in entertainment, but going back to the whole movie prospect, the industry has known for a long time, since Mario Brothers, that having video games and movies together, they could dominate two of the largest, most profitable areas in entertainment. Okay, so that's why they're not going to stop making video game movie adaptations. Okay, that's why they're going to keep trying. And so for the most part, I think most of them still suck. But they suck less, I think, than the ones before. Let's take something like Assassin's Creed. Not a great movie, but more and more as these video game movies are being made, they're actually watchable. Okay, and so I know it's kind of long-winded going back to Rampage, but I feel like as these companies are putting more money into it, they have better actors and actresses in the movies. They are putting big name directors in some of these movies, or up and coming directors, and so they are putting more money and quality and marketing in them. I mean, if you think about it, Transformers is a toy movie, okay, and there's been Transformers video games. So what I think with Rampage, okay, I'm gonna watch it because I love Rampage, the video game, and I kind of want to see how this comes out. Okay, so if they take the same approach, i.e., it's a video game, it's a video game, it's a video game, they take that approach and try not to make it like too much of anything outside of that, then I think the public will actually accept it more. Okay, so for example, my opinion is with Rampage, when this comes out, it's just going to be a fun monster movie. Okay, there will be references to video games for all the fans out there like George. Okay, and if you played the video games, you would know what that refers to. But if it's a fun movie, especially a fun summer type blockbuster movie, then I think more people would spend money to watch the movie, and then the hardcore gaming fans will go watch it. And then if it becomes popular, then obviously they will be able to produce more movies like that. Okay, more Rampage movies, and then by the 5th movie, people will absolutely hate it. But I think Hollywood, the entertainment industry as a whole, they're getting better at it. And as long as, in my opinion, for now, as long as you can produce a movie that knows what it is, just like Mortal Kombat did, and I think Rampage would do the same, and I even think the Tomb Raider movie might be good as well, but as long as you try to stay in that at the beginning and then not try to be this really deep, dark, thoughtful type movie, which is really, it's not, then it'll be successful, okay? So, in my opinion, I think when it comes to video game storytelling, I still think the best medium is the video games themselves. Okay, just look at any of Hideo Kojima's games. Ever since the first Metal Gear, he really wanted to make video games a movie, an art form of its own. And nowadays, a story is very integral to video games. Okay, and so that's the reason why I wanted to talk about this, because first and foremost, I did not know that the Rampage trailer was related to the Rampage video game. That was a really pleasant surprise. And the other pleasant surprise is just by looking at the trailers, it looks fun. It looks fun. It doesn't look to be anything beyond just a fun monster movie, which it so happens to be based upon a video game. And thanks everybody for leaving this list. Well, I know there's so many, but hopefully it'll be good. I think it will be good. Okay, so second bit of news, Mozilla Firefox. They just released a brand new version of Firefox. I think this is the largest overhaul in 10 years. This is a Firefox Quantum, okay? And so, let me see if I could. So, I've already downloaded it on my computer. So, I don't know if you can see it, but this is Firefox Quantum. It is actually Firefox, let me see what version it is. It's Firefox 57, okay? And so this is available, obviously, on Linux and on every platform, okay? And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because our browsers, and I did do a video before where I talked about how our internet browsers are going to be our operating systems. They're going to be our main operating systems. Okay, and I will leave a link up there somewhere that I did talk about that. But I really think that Google really saw this coming years ago. That's why they released their Chrome OS as a primary operating system. And yeah, and the reason why Firefox is so important is because if you are old enough to remember, and I keep saying that because there is history that goes to it, okay? So if you're old enough that you remember that, or you know the history of Mozilla Firefox. Mozilla Firefox actually was born out of Netscape, okay? And back then in the 90s, back in 94, 97, and all the way up to the 2000s, early 2000s, I would say, it was basically Netscape and Microsoft's Internet Explorer. You didn't really have any other options. Of course, you could have used the browsers within Linux. I don't even remember if Conquer and them were around back then. I don't think they were. They might have been. I can't remember. There's a KDE version of the browser. But for the majority of people or all around the world, you either chose Netscape or Internet Explorer. And for a long time, Netscape Navigator was my favorite internet browser. You know, I've never really been a huge fan of Internet Explorer, even back then. And even today, I don't like the Edge browser. That's just my personal opinion. And Netscape was pretty much killed by Microsoft. You know, there was this whole legal action where there was an antitrust legal action taken against Microsoft because Microsoft was bundling Internet Explorer with their operating system. You know, that was considered anti-competitive. And, you know, that went all the way to the 2000s, you know, because Mozilla had to go through the same thing as well. And Chrome, you know, because you buy the operating system, you automatically have Internet Explorer. And I think later on, they didn't really give people a choice to choose another browser. That was in Europe, if I remember correctly. And so basically, Microsoft killed Netscape. And out of the Netscape team, the Mozilla community, they actually produced the Firefox browser. And I've been using Firefox for a long time, okay? But ever since Google Chrome came out in 2007, man, they never stopped, okay? And not everybody likes Google Chrome. Why? Primarily because it's Google. You know, they're collecting a lot of data. I mean, let's just be real, okay? But if you think about it objectively, I still feel like Google Chrome is the better browser. It's just faster, mostly because it's faster. I like to have speed. And that's the big thing that the new Quantum browser is touting, okay? So Lance said, I got the mint update to Firefox 57 yesterday. Yeah, and you know what? I talked about this before, but that's the great thing about Linux, you know? I mean, obviously, if it's a distro that's well supported, you will get updates really fast. And so if you are on Linux Mint, if you go to your system updates right here, okay, you should see an update for Firefox 57. So if you haven't upgraded, I recommend you do, because I have I have been trying this on Linux Mint, and I will say, just playing around with it, it is faster. I mean, although I do have a fast computer, I already noticed that it is faster. And so that's the main things that Firefox is touting. They are touting, I think, 30% better performance, less memory usage. And so anybody knows that, you know, you use your browser, especially if you're opening up a lot of tabs. The internet browser is a huge resource hog, especially when it comes to RAM. Okay, and so, but I think for the majority of people who have modern computers, I don't think the difference will be like night and day, okay? But if you have an older computer, like my laptop right here, I think this one's from 2010 or maybe 2015, I can't remember. But, you know, having Firefox on this or Google Chrome, the faster the better because it's not a newer computer, okay? So Samuel S says, I too did, along with Mint 18.3 Sylvia Beta yesterday. Yeah, and so, you know, if you have already downloaded Firefox, a new version, if any of you are using it, I'd like to know some of your opinions, okay? So for me so far, I am really enjoying it. You know, I still use Firefox, okay? But Google Chrome is my main OS, okay? So let me talk about some of the things that they wanted to really, you know, really focus on. Obviously, speed and RAM usage, resource usage is the first thing they want to talk about. The other thing is, I don't know if you can tell, but it uses a new UI. It's called the Photon UI, and so it's a very clean, flat look. And if you notice, Google Chrome is already there. I don't really use Safari. I do use the Mac OS as well. I don't specifically think it's the best browser in my opinion, and I don't like Microsoft's Edge browser. Yeah, I really don't like it at all. And then in terms of the other types of browsers like Conquer and stuff like that on Linux, I really don't use those at all because because things like Google Chrome, Firefox, Safari and Edge, they're usually going to have the latest and greatest, okay, and so that's why I use those. And also a lot of web apps that you use, they're compatible really 100% only with the most popular browsers. And in my opinion, Google Chrome has the best compatibility with all the web programs that I use, okay? But for Firefox, I still use it. So I'm really happy that Mozilla, the whole community, is able to release this new version because, you know, Firefox is no longer the, you know, the top browser anymore, okay? Google Chrome, if I remember correctly, last owned 60% of the browser market, which is massive, okay? That's a lot, okay? And obviously Google is owned by, Chrome is owned by Google, and so they have a lot more money available to them than the Mozilla Foundation, okay? And so that's a reality, and so they can pump in more resource into it. But hopefully Mozilla Firefox, just like Linux, because it is an open source project, I really do hope that they stay around for the long term, but because we do need an open source option. Now for Google Chrome, there is Chromium, right? But it's still very similar to Android, even though it's open source. Really, the companies behind it, they're the one pumping in the monies, okay? You're not actually putting money in to help these communities. Mozilla, you are, but Mozilla, they also have partnerships with other businesses. Like if you do a new tab, they'll have different top sites or different news stories and stuff. You know, as I mentioned this before, these companies are businesses, so they need to have partnerships and ads and stuff to keep, you know, funding these businesses, okay? And so I don't mind at all, okay? Because these companies, without having money coming in, they can't continue to run as businesses. They can't pay the people who work for them. So if you can support any of these projects like Mozilla that you enjoy using, be sure to help donate to them. And if you're the type of person who wants to donate through other means, like for example, on your search engine, you could use DuckDuckGo as well. I don't think it's the best search engine, but that's an option for you as well. And speaking of search engines, Firefox, with this version, they're actually going back to Google. Okay, and before it was Yahoo that was their default search engine, but you know, Yahoo is just not that great of a search engine. And Apple did something similar. Before, they were using Microsoft's Bing as their default search engine, but they went back to Google. So it's not just like individuals who are trying to de-Google their life, okay? But these companies, they're trying to de-Google for a different reason. It's because it's a competitive advantage, and at the same time, they get money. The other companies get money to use their browsers, okay? Just think about that, to use their search engines. And so, anyway, I am very happy that Mozilla is releasing a new one, okay? And it adds that level of competition. It gives us another open source option. And somebody like myself who has been using computers and remembers Netscape versus Internet Explorer, I've always thought that the Firefox browser, to me, it was the first most popular open source project besides Linux, okay? And actually, I think definitely Firefox had way more popularity than Linux did, in my opinion, because most people knew Firefox. They didn't really know that it was open source or anything, but I think Firefox is one of the most important open source projects that we had. And so, so while this is really important for the long term, as I mentioned in the video I talked about a little bit earlier, more and more of us, our primary application that we use on our computers is our internet browsers. That doesn't matter if you're using Windows, Mac, or Linux. Your operating system, your primary way that you use computer is through your browser. And that's why it is so important that Google, Apple Safari, Microsoft's Edge, any of them, that's why it's so important that you use their browser first. Because in the future, there won't really be operating systems as we know it, okay? A lot of our computers will just be dumb terminals, thin clients. They'll have enough processing power just to render things, you know, but most of your processing, most of all your storage will be done on internet servers somewhere, okay? That's why everything's on the cloud. They're not doing it simply for convenience and simply because it's new technology. They're doing it because in the future, since everybody will be connected to the internet, everybody will be primarily 99% using their computer through a browser, and everybody's going to be storing things online, because by then things will be so fast, it'll be instantaneous, even to upload terabytes worth of data. That's where things are going. And so if these companies can get in now and bring people into their browser, they bring them into their entire ecosystem. So just think about it that way. If you're using Firefox, Google Chrome, Apple Safari, Microsoft Edge, you know that the experience is different. It's the same, but it's different. It's different because of all the services that they offer. Okay, because if you open up like this Firefox tab, right? You open up a new tab, it gives you different stuff, and there's different features. Same thing with Google Chrome. If you open it up, you'll probably see an ad for their new Google Pixel 2 phone. Okay, or you open up Safari, they'll probably be talking about some of the new Apple services. Or if you open up a Microsoft Edge browser, they're probably recommending their latest Xbox One X somewhere. Okay, so it's no mistake that all these companies want the browser to be the primary browser that you use. And so that's why this is important, because if Firefox in the long run did not survive, then you would have no open source operating system to use. And even though Linux, the kernel, is in a lot of devices, even if you have Linux underneath, if people's primary interface is through their browser, it doesn't matter. And so if you can imagine a world without Firefox, then you'll basically be using, if you're using a Microsoft Edge browser, you've been using Windows on your computer. It doesn't matter if it's Linux underneath, because the browser is the ecosystem. Or if you're using Safari, you're going to be basically using an Apple Mac, okay, or Google's. You know, you get the point. And so I think that's important. That's why it's so important that Mozilla Firefox doesn't go anywhere. And I know there's only so much that we as users can support, but if you can, support Firefox, because I don't want to not have an open source choice when it comes to my browser, and then in the future it will no longer be my browser. It will be my primary operating system. Okay, and not unless some Linux version, purely Linux browser comes out that's tied to the Linux operating system. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, but who knows? Okay, Lance, let me see. Lance is saying start page, FTW. Okay, start page, yes. Sammy, yes, even Android version is updated and looks almost similar like in PC. Unfortunately, certain add-ons are not yet compatible, not able to use now, hence waiting for add-ons update. Yes, Sam, very good point. The main drawback of having this brand new Quantum Firefox browser is that add-on compatibility. So right now, 57 legacy add-ons will not work with this new browser, and I think they even note that if on your extensions, if it is one that's not going to work, it'll say legacy on it. And so just kind of be aware of that. If you are the type of person who uses a lot of add-ons and extensions, that you could lose functionality. Okay, so you know, if you are concerned about that, then make sure you check out your extensions and make sure it's not one that will not work when you upgrade, because that would really suck, because I think a lot of people use extensions on their browsers. You know, once again, your browser is basically an operating system, and so all these extensions are basically you installing different programs on your browser operating system. Okay, and so yeah, so that's very very interesting, and I'm very happy that Firefox has released a new version, and so hopefully, you know, hopefully they will grow at least a little bit in their market share. You know, this is a worldwide market. Okay, so I do hope that a lot of people download this and actually use it. Okay, and that they do get some support. You know, so yeah, so let's keep Firefox going. So Sammy Esther says this is where Chrome shines. Yeah, Sam. I mean, as I stated earlier, Chrome is my favorite browser. Okay, it's just fast. It has a lot of functionality and compatibility. I don't have any problems with compatibility. Okay, whereas in Firefox, not everything's 100%, and Safari, I don't even. I mean, I use it on the Mac OS, but I don't have to use it. Okay, and honestly, I don't really use it. Okay, and Edge, of course, I've never used Edge. Okay, so Lance says I can't watch Crunchyroll and Firefox 57 without getting warning. Yeah, it's going to be some growing pains, Lance. And, you know, all of us, pretty much, most of us have multiple browsers. Okay, so for example, for me, a lot of times I'm going to be using Chrome. and then I'll also be using Firefox as well. But Chrome is the one that I use for work, okay? And then I use Firefox for entertainment, you know, like YouTube videos or something like that, okay? And the reason why I do that, and I don't think it matters per se, but because I know Google is collecting a lot of data, if I could like mitigate that a little bit through using Firefox, then I will, because there are brand new Firefox privacy extensions. But honestly, if you're on a website, it doesn't matter. There's so many ways that we could track people on websites. It doesn't matter. Even if you have all these ad block extensions and stuff, there are ways that you can be tracked. So, you know, it's just the whole thought of minimizing it. And of course, I want to support Firefox however I can, because you know, I really, like I said, I really want them to be around as an open source alternative to the browser market. Okay. And so Samuel says, I use Opera exclusively for the built-in free VPN service. Oh yeah, Samuel, I forgot about the VPN services. Yeah, let's not forget that this doesn't just apply to the desktops. They have their mobile versions as well. And so yeah, so if you haven't downloaded the new version of Firefox, please do so. Try it out, and make sure that if you do use a lot of extensions, make sure that it doesn't break anything before you do so. Sorry, let me get some water. Well, there is no water. Okay, so let's move on to the last bit of news. And as always, the last bit of news, it's going to be Linux. Okay, and so, you know, I've noticed something like every week, or maybe it's just me, but I think every week we have more and more Linux news, which is awesome. I mean, I enjoy that. So there's always something going on in the world of Linux, and that's always fun. And so the latest bit of news here is something that a lot of Linux users have been waiting for. Linus Torvalds has been working really hard with the rest of the thousands of people in the Linux community in creating the brand new Linux 4.14 kernel. This will be an LTS, or a long-term support kernel. And what's awesome about it is this version will have a 6-year long-term support, which is great because most LTSs are like 2 years, and so this having a 6-year support, it'll really help. You know, especially from a business point of view, if you are a big vendor who uses like Android, right? It all runs on a kernel, and so there's a long lead time to use the kernel on your version of Android before the product's actually produced. And so sometimes, even if you have a 2-year LTS, by the time the phone is released, it's been tested, that version of Android using that kernel is no longer supported. And so having a 6-year supported LTS version, that'll help a lot, not only for individuals like ourselves, but also for businesses and government institutions that use Linux, okay, and which a lot of companies use Linux, okay, specifically the kernel. And so this would be important. And so some of the main things that are being released, some of the many benefits, and I probably don't know all of them, okay? I'm just like going through some of the very important stuff. So first and foremost, Torvalds is really focusing on security, okay? That'll be very important. We as Linux users, we know that Linux is secure, okay? But we live in a different world now. You know, we live in a world where everything's on distributed systems, everything's online, and so security is extremely complex. And we use multiple systems, multiple operating systems, multiple applications, multiple services, and so there's no way that you're going to be able to prevent security issues from happening. What you can do is mitigate and strengthen certain parts of your overall technology services, okay? Your operating system being one, you have your web services, you have your hardware server services, so you get the idea. There's many parts. And so Torvalds is really focusing on security, okay? All the way down to the SoC levels, to the system on a chip. And one of the biggest contributors to this is Intel. And if you didn't know, Intel is actually the single largest contributor to the Linux code base. Okay, so they put more code back into the Linux kernel than any other provider. Okay, so Intel is #1, and I think behind them is Red Hat Linux. Okay, of course, and obviously there's Google. Facebook contributes. Actually, a lot of the biggest companies, they contribute the most code back to the kernel. Okay, so why Intel is important is they do the 0-day test. Okay, so anytime a new version of a kernel comes out, they'll do a 0-day test where they do a lot of regression testing to make sure that this new version not only is it compatible, but they want to make sure and do some heavy security tests, because you have to remember, as a business, if they are releasing these brand new software and it causes security issues or risks to all their millions of customers who uses their services, their CPUs, their SoCs, I mean, that is a huge problem. They will lose billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, or go out of business. Okay, so that's very important, but it also benefits us as Linux users. Okay, and so Samuel S is saying much awaited long 6-year LTS. Yes. Hey, morning Gaza. Hi, Gold Family. Sorry, Nick, just had an annoying NGINX problem to resolve. No problem, Gaza. Thanks so much for joining. And yeah, so the Intel 0-day test, the regression test is done on the mainline kernel and also over 400 Linux developer trees. So it is pretty extensive. There's also other things called Linux fuzzing tests, and so what this is it will produce like some random fuzzing codes, because for security, hackers or security experts can get into the memory level. Okay, so it's very complex. I don't understand all of it. I am not a security expert, okay, but it's not just simply downloading something on your computer. It could get extremely complex, and so they're also adding a random address space identifier, and I'm just reading some of these off. Memory encryption, just as I talked about, it can go all the way to the memory level. Let me see. In terms of other improvements, one thing that Linux has been continually getting better is what is it? Driver support. Okay, so this would be very important to all of us. So 1,500 contributors to this release. That is awesome. Okay, and you can obviously go to the Linux website, Linux Foundation, or just look on the news to see a list of all the various improvements that they're making. Let me see. Random code, mainline push, okay, 0-day test, and we're supported up to 2023. And one thing that it's really important, okay, and this is why I think focusing on security, which has always been there with Linux, but focusing heavily on security, and as I just mentioned a little bit earlier, we live in a very complex world where everything's connected, right? So I think the largest area of potential security threat, or it's already happened already, is IoT, or Internet of Things, okay? Like our routers, things like baby monitors. If you think about our microwaves, our smart TVs, those are things that we don't think about. Or our robots, our Roomba robots, most of them use Linux underneath. They use the Linux kernel. Security cameras use the Linux kernel. I can't think of very electronic devices that do not use Linux, okay, or the Linux kernel. And so with that, you have a massively, okay, it's not just small, it's a massive security problem. I mean, if they were able to, and this has already happened, obviously. So if people were able to exploit the OS on top of it, running on a Linux kernel, and it runs on a older version Linux kernel, the chances of that getting updated, it's next to zero for a lot of them, okay? Because they're not like computers that you're using. They're just like devices. It could be something like your remote control could have a Linux kernel underneath it. And so by having something like this, where constantly Linus Torvalds and the rest of the humongous Linux community is contributing code base that will actually continually make Linux more secure, I welcome that, because we need that, okay, and because it is so complex. And so I am right now myself, kernel-wise, I'm not running the latest version. I normally don't. I think I'm running like version 4.8. I can't upgrade on Linux Mint. it's easy for you to upgrade to another version of the kernel. But, you know, I have no reason to, okay? I mean, I don't do a lot of testing of new things, and I don't want to break anything else that's been running. And so for myself, normally I would not upgrade to a newer version of kernel unless there's really strong reasons for me to do so, and that I'm fairly confident that it's not going to break anything. So normally I would test that out on like a virtual machine, okay? So that is good news. Let me see if there's anything else that was there. The code name for it was Fearless Coyote, which is pretty funny. Okay, so let me see. Okay, hardware. Okay, AMD secure, RTL Wi-Fi driver, more support for the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so yeah, not much else in terms of the general high level. General high level, in a nutshell, more secure, longer term support, and more driver support, which are all great things. Okay, so Samuel S is saying even the big bad boy Microsoft contributes. Yes, Samuel, and they contribute quite heavily because there is a vested business interest into it. Okay, so Microsoft is using Linux more than ever, but the other way around is Linux is using Microsoft. And so yeah, so I had predicted this before, but look forward to a Microsoft distribution. Microsoft distro. I'm saying that right now. I have said it before. Look out. There will be a distro for Microsoft, and it'll have a lot of Microsoft services. Just you'll see. Okay. And so, hey, Meldun75. Hey, thanks for joining, Meldun. He says, just got Firefox Quantum a few days ago. Speed is okay, but the ping leaves much to be desired if compared with Vivaldi, Yannick's browser, even Brave. Yeah, my dude. I mean, you're probably a little different from most, I think, general users. You probably use your browsers, just by what you've said, you're probably more of the exception to the rule. Okay, it's not going to be fast for everybody, but it seems like you are more of an expert when it comes to browsers. So yeah, there are some things that, and they've done some speed tests versus Chrome, of course, and versus the Edge browser, and there's certain things that it does better, and there's certain things that it doesn't do better. Okay, I'm just happy that we do still have Firefox around, and that they are making improvements. Okay, and so that's awesome. Lance is saying 4.10 is working well for me on Mint 18.2. Yeah, Lance, I did have 4.10 running on another one of my Linux machines, but I wiped that out. Okay, so I no longer have it, so I didn't really have a chance to play with it. Okay. But that's good to know. And so, yeah, I think that's it for all the highlights. And I'm hoping that on another tangent, you know, and very similar to this, whenever they're releasing all of these new updates, okay, and broader support for drivers, and obviously more people using it, which is the end goal, right? You want more people to use this. I do hope it expands and into the gaming area. Okay, we always talk about that, but you know, that's a huge market for at least general consumers to have that in there as well, because if more game developers take advantage of this and use the kernel, use Linux in general, then you know, you will have less reliance on say like Windows, right? A lot of people still stay in Windows because of things like gaming. Okay, I know there are many other applications besides that. Okay, but you know, if they could get more people there because of all these new features and better driver support, especially when it comes to the CPU chip level, you know, for Intel and AMD, then that's awesome. You know, that means we will get better products and things that we want that aren't available. And so hopefully in a few more years, it'll just expand the reach of Linux. Now, one last bit of news that I did want to talk about for Linux, and you know, for us Linux users, it's nothing new. Linux as a desktop operating system, I don't ever think we're going to have the year of the Linux desktop. That's simply not going to happen because Microsoft is there, Apple's Mac OS is there, and like I said, the browsers are going to be our main operating systems in the future anyway. Okay, but one area that Linux has, as an operating system, always dominated, besides, I wouldn't say always, but pretty much almost always, is in the whole realm of supercomputers. Okay, so if you go online, I can't remember the site, but if you look at the top 500 fastest supercomputers in the world. We are talking in the world, supercomputers in the US, in China, in Japan, anywhere, okay? South America, it doesn't matter. The top fastest supercomputers in the entire world, they all use Linux, okay? I don't think out of the top, none of them use Windows, and definitely not Mac. Okay, so for our most important computing all around the world, they're using Linux. And so, let me see, since 1998, the first supercomputer, I think there was the first supercomputer list that actually used Linux. And okay, the last two non-Linux systems are some Chinese IBM power computers. They run AIX. And I think I mentioned this last time, but IBM AIX, that's a Unix operating system, okay? Let me see, China is actually number one. It has 202 supercomputers that are using, except for those two that I mentioned. So like I said, 200 supercomputers run Linux, and the US has 144. Okay, so, but overall, in general, I would say 99.9% of them, they all run on Linux, which is a great thing. So just think about it that way. When there is somebody who is a fanboy, fangirl, and they're making fun of your Linux market share, desktop operating system market share, just remind them that not only is the Linux kernel everywhere, but that the most important computer in the entire world is all running Linux, like 99.9%. All the supercomputers run Linux. And also, if you do some more research, a lot of your top stock markets, the servers that they're running on, they run on Linux. Okay, so that's not a surprise. Okay, so that's just a bit of good news. More good news every week. Like every week, even though we get like these security news, like I think last week there was Linux security host, it's taken care of. Okay, so the news that I'm really happy about is that every week Linux is making more and more strides into the mainstream, which is good because you need marketing, okay, and one of the best forms of marketing is word of mouth, okay, but you need more than that, of course. And so because when it is on the news, like sites like ZDNet or Business Week, or one of the more mainstreams, ZDNet is more tech related, but if it ends on stuff like CNN, Huffington Post, or Fox, or whatever, it doesn't matter. If it ends up on the mainstream and there's Linux there, then that's good. Then it brings more awareness to Linux, okay? And so, yeah, so good news every single week. So maybe next week, crossing my fingers, maybe we'll hear more top-tier game developers that could be releasing more Linux games. Okay, more modern Linux games. And so, let me see, Lance says Linux dominates the server market as well. Yeah, Lance, I think they dominate a certain part of the server market because Windows is still very, very huge in the server market. Okay, so for the server market, a lot of times it's going to be your web servers still, but Windows is still very dominant. It's Windows, Unix, okay, but obviously Linux is, it's a big player in that market, okay? And so, Meldoon75, let's hope that would be the case with desktops. Yeah, Meldoon, yeah, I don't see that happening like I stated earlier. It's just, yeah, Microsoft dominates it. But like I said, when we move over to browser-based operating systems, I don't think it'll matter anymore. I really feel that underneath it all, we're still going to be using Linux kernel. So maybe in the future, pretty much everything will have the Linux kernel underneath, but the operating system layer, it's going to be dependent on whatever the provider is creating it. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that's where we're heading for sure. Okay, and the Linux kernel has proven itself already. Just as I talk about, there's literally millions, billions of devices that use the Linux kernel for everything. And so we know that it can be used everywhere, okay? And so in the future, like I said, since we're going to be using some type of browser-based operating system and everything's going to be on the cloud anyway, yeah, they're going to use the Linux kernel underneath, okay? That's what I see. At least that's still positive, okay? And so that's it for this episode, y'all. It is approaching 1 hour. And so if you had any other thoughts or comments on any of the things that I talked about, be sure to leave it in the comments area below. And as always, I just really want to thank everybody who's joined. As always, my regulars, Lance, Gaza, Samuel S, KI2NE, and also new people like Madoon75, or anybody else that's watching. Thank you so much for joining. It's always fun talking about this geeky stuff. And if you even had any different ideas, okay, leave that in the comments as well, okay? Because I do try to, every week, I do try to focus primarily on geeky stuff, okay? Movies, obviously Linux, anything in the tech space. But if there's maybe some other subjects that you think might be interesting, leave it there in the comments, okay? And so, thank you so much. If you did enjoy these videos, you got value out of them, leave a like and subscribe. And if you wanted to support my channel further, you can do that at patreon.com/geekoutdoors. We'll see you on another live episode.